Hello, my name is Chris Wilmot, and I did my experiment on what is the leading cause of death amongst the African American race. With this topic, it was a very broad spectrum of research and experiments to sort through and even peer reviews. So I had to narrow it down to an age group. But before narrowing it down to an age group, I found that the leading cause of death, which in my opinion, or excuse me, my hypothesis, I thought was going to be homicides. With everything that I come in contact with in my job, and then everything that we're seeing on the news, you would think that police are responsible for the leading cause of death amongst blacks, or you would at least think that black people are the leading cause of death amongst their own race. And I happen to find, when you look at it in a general aspect, that African American men and women do not suffer from homicides the most. They actually suffer from heart disease, according to CDC.gov, which is a credible source that you want to do a lot of your research from when you're doing investigations and research and scientific information, because these sources are a little bit more credible. These people who are posting these things have degrees and in these fields. They're elite analysts and stuff like that. So I like to lean more over to the .govs, .org websites, not just the .coms and the media things, because as you will clearly see in my paper, which I will post as well, that a lot of what the media reports is biased, it's misrepresented, if you don't already know that. And with that being said, with these credible sources, I found that in the top 10 categories, both in the black and white community, heart disease, heart attack, stuff of that nature, dealing with the heart, was the number one amongst across both borders, and which was shocking to me. But as you start to go through the list, numbers and the names of what actually is killing these groups of people change drastically. And you'll find in the white community, according to CDC.gov as well, that the white community doesn't even have homicide on the top 10 list of anything that they suffer or die from. But it's on I believe it was number 6 on the top 10 list of the black community. So it's definitely an issue in the black community that homicides do cause some type of impact on our community, being an African American man as myself. But what I found when I narrowed it down and zeroed in on a specific age group between 15 and 36, kind of still broad, so you can kind of still get a feel for the statistics, and they won't be as biased or segregated to just one type of people or one type of group. But I did have to narrow it down because it was a little too broad to sort through all the information and experiments and even peer reviews to get a better understanding of what the leading cause of death was, and then kind of get more information to back it up. So when I narrowed it down between 15 to 36, I found that homicide was the leading cause of death amongst the African American race. And with recent incidences and information that the media has presented and portrayed out, that they make us, or maybe even us, may think that the black community is suffering from the epidemic of white supremacy or white people, if you will, or even the police department. And that is actually not true, because in my research I found that the leading cause of death not only was homicides, but it was actually black on black homicide. So black on black related crimes, black on black related violence. And although with being with researching this topic, I had to be fair with researching things that may actually come against these statistics, and some and I did come across some good information in experiments that said that actually the leading cause of death, although may be in the black community homicides, the people who lead the most in homicides is actually the white community, which I did not know. But I wouldn't be fair if I didn't check the credibility of those sources, and I did, and it actually happened to check out. So the credibility of these sources on uncut.com, which was a website that is associated and affiliated with the Black Lives Matter movement. Many of you may know that. And that Black Lives Matter movement has that website that kind of gives you the 5 myths about black people that many people think that black people are leading in or causing, but really the white community is leading in. But what they fail to address is, although the white community may lead in the homicides, and they lead in violent crime, and they even lead in gang-related violence, they also lead in population. And this is something that was kind of a bias. They misrepresented this information when I read it. And although the source was credible because they used the CDC.gov website, they misrepresented it how they worded it in their in the Uncut website, which you can take a look as well in all these resources I will provide. And that showed that although they led 50.7% of homicides were committed by the white community, but we represent the 47.2% of homicides. So with them being 50, we being 47, yes, they lead, but we only make up of 16% of the population of the United States. Roughly around that. I'm still trying to make sure I get a little bit more accurate percentage, but it's an approximate of 16%. And with 16% of population is made up of African Americans, why are they leading in 47% in homicides? Yes, it's under the white community, but it's still way too much for the black community to be leading in, or excuse me, to be having that numbers in there. So I said in my paper, I said a word, we are over represented in areas of the jail cell, in the jail, the prisons, HIV and AIDS. Many people don't still have seem to sweep that on the rug, that we are still leading in those arenas, and we ought not be either leading in them, or we ought not be overrepresented in them. And I'm finding out in the research that some areas we're actually not leading in, but we're very, very, very much overrepresented. And these are just things you need to take into consideration when you're doing research for yourself on whatever topic. Check the credibility of the source. Make sure the credibility is from an actual person who is specialized in that field, or people, or a group, or an organization that they can back up what they say. And try to steer away from the media, because if you don't already know, they're just going to spin things in their favor, which is the majority of newscasters are biased. They like to get ratings and views and likes. So just be mindful that we don't just fall gullible to even my own speech to you today, that you research this for yourself, look into this for yourself, and actually ask yourself, what is the leading cause of death amongst African American men, so we can and women, so we can appropriate a better solution and actually make all lives matter, like that we have been saying, but also make all black lives matter, not just a specific group or arena. But my statistics and my experiment shown to be very conducive to what's going on in the world today, and hopefully you can benefit from it as well. And I also learned something for myself I can take to my friends and family and appropriate as well. Hopefully you all got something out of this, and I will see you all. Signing off.